So hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar, the Irish launch of the Interreg Northwest Europe Call for Proposals. My name is Sarah Davern. I'm the National Contact Point. I'll have met some of you separately, and I hope to meet more of you in the future. So today we'll have a 2-hour webinar, and you'll hear about the background of Interreg funding in Ireland, as well as the basics of the currently open call for proposals, and some valuable lessons learned from partners that were successful in the past. So in particular, we're going to hear from the Three Counties Energy Agency and the University of Limerick. So before we start, I'll maybe do a little bit of housekeeping. So please just be aware that everyone will actually be on mute today because there's a lot of attendees, so I hope that's all right. People are encouraged to ask questions and to interact, so you can use the chat function. The first set of questions and answers will actually be after, so we'll have an introduction from the director, then we'll have myself and Alexander Columbani from the Joint Secretariat, and then we'll have about 10-15 minutes for questions and answers. So that'll be the first chance to respond to your questions in the chat. And I just want to let everyone know as well that today's event is being recorded, so just please be aware of that. So my colleague Catherine might press the record button when you're ready. So this is the agenda for the day ahead. To start the day, we're going to be joined by the Director of the Southern Regional Assembly, David Kelly. The Southern Regional Assembly has been the managing authority for EU-funded regional programmes and for Interreg for over 20 years. And David is particularly familiar with Interreg Northwest Europe. He's currently a member of the monitoring committee for that funding programme. So I'd just say thanks, David, for joining us. Welcome, and thank you for taking the first session of today's webinar. And we'll move on to your slides. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. You're all very welcome to the Irish launch of the Northwest Europe Call event. I suppose many of you probably would have attended the programme-wide launch. I think it was last Thursday, the 31st of March. But today, what we hope to do, as Sarah said, is look, I suppose, to reiterate those key features and key messages from the programme. I suppose also go through again, I suppose, the key features of what makes a good project. But you'll also get, I suppose, the opportunity to hear first-hand experience, as Sarah said, from successful Irish partners in the last round, and really, I suppose, get a chance to maybe pick their brains about what worked well, what didn't work well, what are the key things to look out for. I suppose another key feature of today is that you will get the opportunity to have one-to-one clinics with Sarah, the National Contact Point, really to get direct advice on your project idea, your projects, to get specific guidance and support from Sarah. So again, I would encourage you all to take that opportunity. Just a very quick introduction, I suppose, about ourselves and the Regional Assembly and the role we play. Next slide, please, Catherine, if you don't mind. As Sarah said, my name is David Kelly. I'm the Director of the Southern Regional Assembly, and it's one of 3 regional assemblies in Ireland that were established following the local government reform in 2014. It was an amalgamation of the previous 9 regional authorities, which are at NUTS 2 level or NUTS 3 level, and the old 2 regional assemblies, which had key responsibilities for specifically managing regional operational programs. So the 3 new regional assemblies are kind of an amalgamation of those functions and a reconfiguration at the regional level, at the NUTS 2 level in Ireland. Effectively, the regional assemblies are I suppose, the regional tier of government in Ireland. We're made up of our constituent local authorities. So in our case, in the Southern region, we have 10 local authorities covering 9 counties. So it's all of the counties of Munster and South Leinster. The democratic representation is made up by nominations from those local authorities, plus the representatives of the committee of region. So they have a key function in terms of the democratic process, but also in terms of the statutory decisions that they have to take as part of their functions within the regional assembly. Our main functions are really got to do with regional development. I suppose that's through a regional planning function, and also through the integration of I suppose EU cohesion policy, EU cohesion funding into that. So that's primarily delivered through our statutory function of developing regional, spatial and economic strategies, through our functions with the managing authority function for EU funded programs and projects, but also in terms of a role in the context of European Territorial Cooperation, or ETC, or INTERREG, and primarily by hosting the national contact point. So we have Sarah for the North West Europe programme. We also host the national contact point for INTERREG Europe, and we also have our contact points or development officers for the current Ireland Wales programme, which unfortunately won't continue into the new programmes. Next slide, please, Catherine. Maybe just to say a thing or two just about the regional spatial economic strategies. I suppose these are the fundamental framework for the development of the 3 regions over the next 12 years. There is a statutory policy document, effectively emanates from the Planning Act, Planning and Development Act, but the key role is to translate the national planning framework and the government economic policies to regional level out to the period to 2031. So it really is to support the implementation of the NPF and government economic policies. As I said, it's a strategic document. It sets the key framework for, I suppose, local and economic planning and development over the next 12 years. So really, it's a key driver of balanced regional development. Under the national planning framework, there is a projection of an additional 1 million people going to be living in the country over the next 20 years. About 50% through inward migration, 50% through natural increase. So we have to find a sustainable solution for where those people live and work, and to balance I suppose the trend of the growth of the eastern region, particularly around Dublin, over the last number of years. So really to redistribute that growth through the country over the next number of years. Next slide, please, Catherine. Again, maybe just quickly touch on the strategy itself and what its key, I suppose, its key focus is. And all 3 regional strategies are broadly similar. The teams might be slightly different, or a slightly different focus, but generally they're broadly the same. So really, in our region, the overall strategy is to build, I suppose, a strong, resilient, sustainable region over the next 20 years. So that's really about enhancing our regional accessibility, transforming our transport system, optimizing international connectivity, increasing our competitiveness, and so on and so forth. So it falls under 3 broad areas. So really trying to make our region the greenest region in Europe, the most creative and innovative region in Europe, and the most livable region in Europe. So when you look at those 3 broad headings and align those with I suppose, the 5 policy objectives that are set out in the new cohesion policy framework, they align very well. So particularly in terms of smart and innovative, in terms of low carbon and green, in terms of inclusive, and so on. So there is a very clear correlation between the overall objectives to drive the regional development of the region and that of EU cohesion policy. Next slide, please, Catherine. And look, overall EU cohesion policy has been significant and critically important, I suppose, for the development of our regions over the last 20 years, but also it will be critically important going forward. So there's always been a very strong alignment. And in fact, I suppose the evolution of regions in Ireland is very much linked to, I suppose, cohesion policy in general, going back to the establishment of the regional authorities back in the early 90s, with the requirement to have regional monitoring of the implementation of cohesion policies. So look, over the years, cohesion policy and ERDF has made a significant contribution to the development of the regions and significant investment across a whole range of policy areas and policy teams. You can see a lot of those on your screen over the last number of years, particularly with regard to building the innovation and research capacity, in terms of supporting micro enterprises, in supporting energy efficiency, broadband, and so on. So that has played a critical part. So the mainstream cohesion policy programs have played a significant part in the development of our regions. Next slide, please, Catherine. But also too is as has INTERREG, or European Territorial Cooperation. It really has contributed quite a lot to the development of our regions. So back in 2018, a joint piece of work was carried out by the 3 regional assemblies, just looking at, I suppose, even midterm through the 1420 programs, what the impact of INTERREG has been to the regions generally. And look, you can see from the map, even at the midterm stage of the 1420 program, almost every county in Ireland had either project partners or ERDF or funding being delivered through INTERREG across all of the strands of INTERREG, the cross-border, transnational, and the interregional. So INTERREG has played a significant role in the development of the regions. I suppose one of the key points about INTERREG or ETC, or the beauty of it, is that you can, I suppose, be a little bit more creative, a bit more innovative in terms of the approach you take over and above the mainstream programs, but it also provides that key opportunity, which is, to me, is the key selling point, to work with partners across Europe, to learn from what they're doing, to work with them in delivering on shared issues, shared problems, and come up with shared ideas and shared initiatives. Next slide, please, Catherine. So look, I suppose the impact of INTERREG in Ireland, I suppose, really reflects the evolution of INTERREG from its inception back in the early 90s. So it has grown quite significantly to be, I suppose, a key component or a key objective in its own right in cohesion policy. And this has been built on again in the 21 to 27 period. So the scale of INTERREG is maintained at almost 10 billion euros. So again, it's a key opportunity. It's still one of the key objectives of EU cohesion policy. It covers all 5 strands or all 5 policy objective areas that are a part of the framework going forward, but it also has 2 of its own INTERREG specific objectives. So again, which is building on the importance of INTERREG, and I suppose in ensuring that collaboration or supporting that collaboration, that solidarity, that understanding across our borders. There are also a whole range of simplification measures introduced to make the whole process easier, more attractive for agencies and organizations to get involved. So it's still going to cover the 3 strands: cross-border, transnational, and interregional. All 3 strands are applicable to Ireland. Unfortunately, in terms of the cross-border, we only have 1 now. Due to Brexit, Ireland and Wales will no longer continue, but the Peace Plus programme is still in operational. In terms of interregional, we have INTERREG, Europe, Eurobact, ESPON, and so on. And then, of course, with the transnational, which is the topic of today, Ireland is able to apply to 3. So you have Northern Pacific and Arctic, Atlantic area, and of course, Northwest Europe. And Northwest Europe is the biggest of the transnational programs. And over the years, Ireland has always done very, very well in terms of its success rate in the Northwest Europe program. And I think Alexander will probably talk to this a little bit further. So look, I think it really provides a really good opportunity for Irish partners to get involved and to really build good, solid partnerships with other organizations across the Northwest Europe area, to deal with common challenges, common opportunities, to share ideas and to share the development of initiatives and really good project ideas. I suppose I think in the current global pandemic, in the current, I see Sarah's camera's on, so I need to move on. I'm almost there, Sarah. Just I suppose finally just to note, look, I suppose in the current global pandemic era, in the current geopolitical environment, I think the importance of ETC can't be overemphasized, particularly in terms of I suppose working together across borders, building that solidarity, that greater understanding. I think it really emphasizes the importance that INTERREG and European territorial cooperation plays in the wider scale of things. So look, just a last word for me, really just to encourage you all to engage with the program and take the opportunity from today or after today to contact Sarah, to work with Sarah, and to take on board the advice and support that she can offer. So look, I'll leave it there and wish you well today, and I'll speak to you later in the morning. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, David. Thank you very much for that interesting overview. So it is really useful to understand how INTERREG fits within cohesion policy and to get a feel for the benefits to Irish citizens generally. So now we'll move to the next speaker on our agenda, Mr. Alexander Columbani. Alexander is coming from the Joint Secretariat Office for INTERREG Northwest Europe in Lille in France. Alexander is the coordinator of the network of national contact points, and he has many years of experience in the design and selection and monitoring of successful INTERREG projects. So thank you, Alexander, for joining us today, and I'll let you take over.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and hello to everyone. I will indeed start by giving an overview of the Northwest Europe program, and especially focusing on what themes our new program will be addressing. As David was mentioning, Ireland has been doing good in the Northwest Europe program in 2014-2020, and we obviously hope that this will still be the case in this new program. But before I dive into this new program, maybe just a few words on the 2014-2020, which is still ongoing, and just on the general framework in which INTERREG fits at EU level. Next slide, please. Because yes, obviously, if we're going to be talking a lot about themes today about energy efficiency, circular economy, innovation, we shouldn't forget, and that will be very important for all the project applicants, that what we're looking for in INTERREG is above all an instrument to promote cohesion. So we're looking for projects that will fight territorial disparities via cooperation across and beyond borders. Because INTERREG is a framework for different actors in different countries to get together to develop projects to tackle some of the key challenges that can be found in Europe, in Northwest Europe in our case. So what are these main challenges in the Northwest Europe area? I think it's important to remind them. If we can go to the next slide. Here you can see the map where we still have UK, but the challenges I think remain the same. First of all, Northwest Europe is one of the most urbanized and densely populated area in Europe, including some of its biggest cities, Paris, Amsterdam, Brussels, even Dublin here in Ireland. It's with the UK, it was 180 million, so 30% of the EU population living in Northwest Europe, with all the pressure on environment, resources, and the pollution that it can potentially create. It's also one of the most economically dynamic, innovative, and wealthy parts of Europe, responsible for the production of 46% of its GDP. And at the same time, and maybe as a consequence of this very high level of development, Northwest Europe is also one of the biggest CO2 emitters in Europe, and one of the highest energy consuming regions of our continent. And also, as I said, one of the wealthiest, and at the same time, an area where the territorial inequalities, disparities remain very high between urban and rural areas, within urban areas. So these are globally the challenges that we have in mind, and that still remain the same in this new program, and that have led to the existence of Northwest Europe and to the financing of the 102 projects under the 2014-2020 program. So as you can see on the slide, it's more than 1,000 project partners that have been supported, 378 million that has been allocated. And as I said, yes, Ireland has been doing relatively well in our program, with over 30 million euros, which has been directly given to 88 Irish partners, and in the framework of 52 projects, 5 of which we had lead partners from Ireland. So quite an important place in our program. Just 2 slides to be a little bit more precise on how the current program, the outcome of the current program. First of all, on the partner distribution, here you can see that, well, one thing which is good is that we have managed in this current program to have partners from pretty much all the regions of Northwest Europe. As you can see, some of them are outside the NWE area. I'll come back to that a little bit later. Ireland has been doing pretty well. There is a concentration in the central zone of Northwest Europe, Belgium, south of Netherlands, northern France. And we will be seeking in this new program, 2021-2027, to have maybe even a more, let's say, balanced repartition of our partners and consequently of funding throughout the NWE area. And then next slide, please. If we look at the type of stakeholders that we have reached out to in the current program, we see, I mean, there again, that the repartition in the sort of quadruple helix framework is pretty good. We have representatives of all the 4 components of the quadruple helix: higher education, SMEs, public authorities, interest groups, NGOs, others. But it's true that we will insist even more strongly in the new program on this quadruple helix, and in particular on the representation of public authorities and interest groups, NGOs, others, because the new program, and we'll come back to that later also, is very much about implementation, rollout, dissemination, and to that extent, having public authorities and NGOs, associations that can impact on the ground will be crucial. So what about the new program? You have probably, if you've attended previous events, you've probably seen this map already. It's on our website for some time. It's 7 countries, so Ireland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and then part of France, part of Germany, and Switzerland as a 3rd country. The UK has announced in summer of 2020 that it will no further participate in ETC programs, European Territorial Cooperation programs, which means that they will not be part of any INTERREG program and cannot participate as partners in any INTERREG projects, including Northwest Europe. They can still participate as associated organizations, but not as project partners as such. The budget is consequently slightly lower, 310 million euros for this new programming period, although it remains the biggest INTERREG transnational program budget. And even if it is lower, this decrease has actually been limited by the fact that many countries of our zone have increased their contribution, which to a certain extent shows that the Northwest Europe program is something which member states are happy about and want to see continuing. Our co-financing rate remains the same, 60%, as in the current program. Next slide, please. And just to continue on the geographical scope, we have some new regions. So even if we have on the one side lost the UK, it doesn't compensate, of course, but our program zone has extended itself towards the north in Germany with 3 new regions, and in the Netherlands, which means that we have now the entire country of Netherlands part of the Northwest Europe program. And in Ireland, all counties are eligible. Next slide, please. So last note on the geographical aspects, which are also eligibility criteria. This is really important as soon as if you want to apply for step 1, the things that you need to keep in mind is that we will be wanting 3 partners from 3 different countries. That's the minimum needed to compose your partnership. Obviously, you can go beyond, and I think we have never had actually a project with only 3 partners. Usually it requires a little bit more. We're often asked about the ideal size of partnership, but there is no ideal number. The ideal size really depends on your needs, on the project objectives that you set for yourself. And maybe just one thing to keep in mind is that the larger the partnership, the more difficult it will be to manage from an administrative and financial point of view. So just to keep this in mind, we have had the cases of projects with over 25 partners, and then on top of that, even associate partners, and it became very difficult to manage, very time consuming from an administrative point of view. So just an advice on that level, I mean, keep it simple and just bring in the partners that you need and only the ones that you really need and that really play a role in the partnership. So then we need, just one more word on the previous slide, we need at least 2 of the partners must be from the Northwest Europe area. That's very important, which means that you can have some partners outside the area, but if it justifies, which means that you will have to explain in the application form, in your application form, that you have not managed to find these competences that are really required for your project in the Northwest Europe area. Okay, next slide, thanks. So concerning the planning, the call 1 has opened on the 22nd of March after a long preparatory phase, which has lasted for more than a year and a half. We have our the general framework of our program with the INTERREG program, with the program manual. Everything is on our website. So and the GEMS, which is the place where you will be submitting your application form, is now available. The closing of the call 1, step 1, will be on the 15th of June at noon. Very, very important to really respect that strict deadline. We have had often the case of unfortunate candidates that would submit with one minute late, and unfortunately we need to be very rigid on this. And then if you are approved in step 1, it goes to step 2, and the closing of the call 1 step 2 will be on the 15th of December. So that leaves you close to 6 months to work on the step 2 application form. Next slide, please. So concerning the themes, the overall thematic scope of our program is similar to the current one, but slightly different. It's to address green, smart, and just transition with the aim to support a balanced development and territorial resilience. So within this overall objective, we have the member states have defined 5 different priorities, each of the one referring to an EU policy objective. 3 of them are focusing on the green agenda related topics, climate and environment, energy transition, and circular economy, and 2 of them are focusing on innovation and inclusion. This shows, I mean, for the experienced candidates, you'll immediately see that we have a wider scope. We are addressing some new topics, for instance, biodiversity and climate adaptation in priority 1, or social inclusion in priority 5. And it's also very important for the experienced candidates in particular to really take a careful look at some of these priorities, because there are, even if the names or the titles remain similar, for example, I'm thinking of priority 4 in particular on innovation, the positioning, the approach is a little bit different. I'll come back to that in just a minute. So if we can go to the next slide, please, thanks. So each one of these 5 priorities include 1 or more specific objectives, and projects will have to select 1 specific objective that their project will contribute to at the start of their application. So as soon as step 1, you'll have to select 1 of these specific objectives. In priority 1, climate and environment, we have 2 of these specific objectives. The first one, in which we will be looking for projects on nature and biodiversity protection, as well as reducing pollution. So projects dealing with enhancing the protection and preservation of nature, biodiversity, improving, for instance, or maintaining green or blue infrastructures and ecosystems, reducing air pollution. And the second specific objective in this priority 1 will be about climate change adaptation and disaster risk prevention. So here we're looking for projects that will contribute to mitigating heat stress, floodings, or promoting, for example, a better water management. In the second priority, we have 2 specific objectives, 1 on promoting energy efficiency and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, where obviously here we'll be looking for projects that, for example, increase the energy performance in the building, the transportation, or the district heating sectors. And then on the second specific objective, promoting renewable energy, we will here be trying to address the barriers to improve renewable energy production and consumption in the consumption mix of the NW region, and implement projects on different technologies, for instance, wind and solar power, bioenergy, the use of biomass, hydropower, geothermal, or hydrogen technologies. Then priority 3, here the objective is to promote a place-based, circular and resource-efficient economy, and we're here going to look for projects that improve the awareness and capacity levels of stakeholders in the transition to a circular and resource-efficient economy. We'll seek to support projects that address process, product, or material efficiency and value chains, or via business models for more resource efficiency and better waste management. Next slide, please. And then here for the two priorities, which are more on the social and inclusiveness side, we have priority 4, innovation and resilience, where here the overall aim of the priority is, above all, to improve regional territorial resilience, and to do this by increasing innovation capacities of public and private players throughout Northwest Europe. And here we'll be looking for projects that reduce disparities in, for example, increasing the innovation capacities of regions, in the use of technologies, and in particular the deployment of digitalization, for example. And then finally, I'm almost done. I see Sarah's. So finally, priority 5, inclusive society. In this priority, we're tackling again disparities within the NW territories, but in 4 main areas: employment, health, and culture and tourism. On unemployment, that's the first SO. The main objectives will be to improve the access to the labor market and promoting quality employment, especially empowering, increasing the employability of vulnerable groups. On the second specific objective, it's about improving accessibility to health and long-term care services, especially in rural areas. And the last one, on culture and tourism, here the idea is to support 2 sectors which have been particularly affected by the COVID crisis by making these sectors more sustainable, supporting their digitalization, and enhancing access for vulnerable people to the to tourism and culture. So there, last slide, and that will be very quick, just to say that obviously in my presentation I couldn't cover everything on these specific objectives. You can look at the IP, but maybe a first approach is to look at the fact sheets that we have made available on our website. For each one of the specific objectives, you have a fact sheet describing our expectation, the objectives, the target groups, the activities, the results that we are expecting for each one of these objectives. And I think this can be a first way to check if your project idea can potentially fit our program. Okay, thank you. And back to Sarah.
Thank you, Alexander. So that was a really interesting overview of the funding generally. And thanks to everyone who's shared comments in the chat. Please keep doing that. Our first questions and answers session is going to be coming up now after my few slides. So as a national contact point, I'll take the next session, and I'll just walk you through a few slides that highlight what Interreg Northwest Europe considers to be a good project. So thank you, Catherine. So I suppose the first thing, and that Alexander slightly touched on this earlier, is the type of project, the composition of the consortium. What we're looking for is a nice balance across society. Alexander referred to this as the Quadruple Helix, and that's a term you might see written in various EU funding documents. And what it really means here is that we'd like to see a balance of public partners, private partners, academia, and civil society within the project, with the idea that a balanced grouping of cross-section of society and stakeholders will lead to greater impact and benefit from the end of the project for the citizens. Public can be understood as local authorities, regional authorities, national government agencies. So, for example, the Sustainable Energy Agency or the likes of Teagasc and so on. Private SMEs, extremely welcome. Also business support organizations, and of course industry is an important stakeholder in different projects depending on the purpose. Academia, a natural partner, obviously the research. This type of funding tends to be more towards implementation and the rollout, so that's important for university researchers and IT experts from the Institutes of Technology in Ireland to be aware of, that we're really looking for that rollout during the project life in the territories. And civil society, also mentioned earlier by both David and Alexander, you know, citizens groups, representation groups, lobby groups, patient organizations, NGOs, really an important partner in nearly any project. So go to the next slide, please, Catherine. The type of projects that we're kind of looking for are a project that will jointly tackle a common territorial challenge or identify an opportunity. That would develop or test existing approaches, but implement them maybe in a slightly different context, either geographically or in a different sector or in a different operating environment. And We also would like projects to aim at further dissemination and uptake, and importantly, rollout during the project of the approach developed. And the next slide, please. So taking all that into consideration, the method of your activities, we'd kind of like to see at least 2 of the following options. So perhaps the elaboration and implementation of a joint strategy or an action plan, joint development and implementation of joint pilot actions so that we're testing tools or solutions, and in addition, capacity building and awareness raising activities. So that could include, for example, joint trainings across the different locations. Thanks, Catherine. The next one. What makes a good project? So in addition to that sort of overarching approach where you're looking to do something jointly and have a strategy and an activity, it also needs to fit within the bigger framework and the bigger direction for the region in the 3 countries where you're working, for the national planning and policy, and of course the EU vision. So David kind of gave us a little introduction earlier to that bigger picture overarching framework, and that's actually very important when you're thinking through the logic of your project idea. So you really need to specify why your project is needed. What is the problem that you're going to solve? And why is that a problem in 3 different countries in Northwest Europe? Try to identify the territorial challenge and opportunities that you might leverage. And importantly, of course, what change you think that your project could bring in those 3 locations. So we also like to see a profile of where you're going to intervene. So is it more rural project, or is it peri-urban or urban? And as I mentioned, really important that it's embedded in this overall strategic framework. So I have little pictures up there with the national, for Ireland, the climate action plan would be an obvious one that nearly any project would need to align with. The cohesion policy mentioned by David earlier, the European Green Deal, if you go really big for the whole of Europe, and then back down to the regional level, I have the cover of our regional spatial and economic strategy for the southern region there, but there is also one available for the Eastern Midlands region and the Northern Western region. So just have all these kind of issues in mind. So thanks, Catherine. The next slide. So a good project indeed needs to have the right types of organizations involved, that quadruple helix that we've kind of covered. The official text from the European Commission actually defines the target groups for each specific objective. And again, you can see that in that official text, which is available on our website. You could also see them in the fact sheets that Alexander gave the link to. And very important here is the last bullet point, which is that projects really need to be transnational in nature. What does transnational mean? It means that you're working jointly with other organizations and other people in these minimum three countries to identify a joint problem and a joint solution. So the citizens in those 3 countries ideally will benefit from your project. So you're not simply taking some information from one country and rolling it out and benefiting the citizens in just one other country. Really, you're trying to look for a benefit for all across the 3 countries. So a real transnational approach. In the next slide. A good project, it needs to contribute to at least one of the program's specific objectives. That's what Alexander was explaining earlier with those pillars with the specific objectives in each one. You have to choose one. It's a drop-down menu, so it is worth a bit of reading from the very start to really feel where you fit. Your objective of your project, of course, must be realistic and achievable. We ask for up to 3 project-specific objectives. So for your project rollout, we ask for you to identify your own 3 objectives. And of course, your project must define and quantify expected outputs and results as any project would. Next slide, please, Catherine. Thank you. So just to go back to what we're kind of looking for, a little bit different to other perhaps more research-focused funders. We are not really looking for a project that is completely new and amazing. We're not looking to famously reinvent the wheel. Perhaps you'd like to develop and test new approaches or adapt implement existing approaches. So that would be most welcome in the different sectors or in the different regions, or ensure further uptake of ideas. Again, these concepts are explained in the official document, which you can find on our website. But I suppose the message here is that we're not at the basic research stage. We're really looking for the project to be implemented during the project life in society. Another important element linked to that is the long-term effects. So we ask for long-term effect activities and sustainability across time to be included in the work packages, and they must have activities that are clearly linked to long-term effects. So what happens after the EU funding for this project stops? We really think that's important to consider in the proposal stage. Next slide, thank you. So we believe that for Interreg Northwest Europe, a good project has, of course, a strong intervention logic. Important for you today, perhaps, is what you need to show up at step 1 and step 2. So step 1, the deadline 15th of June. As Alexandra said, the midday deadline, very important. Please note that midday is Central European time. So for Ireland, it's actually 11 o'clock in the morning. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at these European projects. So step 1, the territorial challenges, we need you to outline them. What will the project address across Northwest Europe? Is the project a good fit with the priority areas and the specific objectives that we've identified? How will our project address the challenges? Who are the key actors that we will involve? And what are the expected results? So that's quite high level actually at step 1. It's not a long document. You can see the template on our website. And the deadline for that, 15th of June. At step 2, we get more into the nitty gritty. What are the phases to ensure implementation? What is your work package detailed design? Exactly what activities will you be rolling out? How much per activity will be shown in a budget? And of course, the project duration. Next step, please, Catherine, thank you. So yeah, just the application process. This is kind of a summary page, really. Step 1, we're looking for the idea and the overall main objective, the overall vision for your consortium and what you can bring. Step 2 is where we get into the detailed work plan. There will be appraisal at both stages for eligibility and quality, and both stages will be online submission only. So it's through these GEMS, Joint Electronic Monitoring System, that will have instructions and links and so on in our website. So the next slide, please, Catherine. Another interesting approach is to take a look at our online applicant community. So this can help you to find international partners. You can put up project ideas that you might have yourselves that you'd like to share, see if anyone's interested. You can read other people's project ideas, maybe you'd like to join their group. We also hope that that will become a kind of library area for you can have key documents available. At the moment, they're still available anyway on our website, so don't hesitate to go there. And there's a link here to register. These slides will be shared with all the participants after the webinar. The next slide. So in summary, to prepare your application, you can go to our website to look at these key documents I recommend, especially if you're considering that 15th of June deadline. The Word version of the electronic submission, very handy, because the electronic submission system, you don't really want all your project partners going in there editing. So perhaps work off this Word application form, freely available on our website for download. Take a look at the assessment criteria. That gives you the weighting, the percentage weighting for each section. Eligibility criteria, of course, very important in case you have any doubts about the location of your partner or whether it's private or public and so on. And so there's a link there just to the website. You can find it easily, I think, if you go to Northwest Europe, Interreg Northwest Europe. We always advise people to get in contact with the national contact point, like myself, and each country has one. So if you're approached by another partner in another country and they'd like to be the lead, you can advise them to reach out to their national contact point in Northwest Europe, and they'll receive great guidance and support from the experience of these people. We recommend you use the applicant community platform can put up your CV, just see who's out there who might invite you to join their consortium. You can also join the Joint Secretariat mailing list for this kind of newsletter that comes out, keep you up to date on what's happening, or type new webinars that might pop up, or trainings. And of course, the Irish Partner mailing list, which is just essentially another newsletter that I run. And I try to keep it more specific to the Irish environment. And the last slide, I think, Catherine. Yeah, just to say thank you. And thank you to Alexander. Maybe Alexander might like to put you back on your camera. So that's it from my side. It's time for questions. So I see Rose has also popped up. Thank you, Rose. I wonder, did we have any questions, Rose, that you'd like to?
Yeah, we have quite a number of questions. So thank you very much, Sarah and Alexandra, for very informative presentations. I might start with yourself, Alexandra, if that's okay. We have a question, and I think you might have covered this off in your presentation, but maybe just to reiterate the point. We have a question in to ask, can any UK organisations be partners in a project?
Yes, thank you, Rose. It's indeed a question that we get often. So, I mean, to be really clear, no, unfortunately, the UK is not eligible as a project partner in the 2021-2027 program. However, UK organizations can be what we call associate organizations. So it used to be called associate partners, now it's called associate organizations. That means that they can participate in specific moments of the program. They do not financially contribute to the project. They do not receive ERDF, but they can effectively act as observers. So it's interesting to have them on board, because for dissemination purposes, these associate organizations can play an important role to disseminate, yes, either some ongoing results during the project rollout, or just to give a greater dimension to the project impact after the project ends. They can also participate in very specific moments, conferences, workshops of the project to bring in some specific expertise. So yes, that's an interesting possibility. And for these specific participations, like conferences, workshops, like I mentioned, their travel and accommodation can potentially be reimbursed through one of the project partners involved in the project.
Okay, and we just did have another question in specifically asking that, whether Wales could join as an associate partner, and what kind of scope would there be for that?
Yes, absolutely. An organization from Wales, from anywhere in the UK, can be an associated organization within a project partnership.
Okay, I just have one more question for you, Alexandra. I have a question in to ask, can a partner apply more than once under this call for funding?
Yes, I mean, if the question is, can they apply with two different projects? Yes, they can apply with two different projects, with three different projects, in different specific objectives and different priorities. That's up to them, as long as they have time to do it, because it does take quite some time to even prepare a step one application form. So I think the time that it requires should not be underestimated. Even if the application form is relatively short, actually, I would have a tendency to say that most of the work is in step one, because that's where you have to do the broad design of your application, to define the objectives, the sub-objectives, to design the core partnership, meaning the most important partners that will be leading the whole project throughout its duration. So it is a very important moment, and I mean, unless the organization has a lot of resources, but I'd be surprised that an organization has the capacity to submit 5 or 6 applications in one same call. Just if I may, just to finish on this, I don't think we've mentioned it, but the plan in our program is to have calls at least once a year, and ideally even once every 9 months approximately. The second call will be opened normally towards the end of the year, end of November, early December, which means that if ever you're not ready at this call, it doesn't matter, you can go for the next one. And yeah,
it probably gives you even more time to strengthen your application rather than rush it at this point. Sarah, I have a question here for you. The question is, how many work packages are usually recommended?
Yeah, so up to 3 work packages are possible. You can have less if you want to. So that's a bit different to the last period. So there's no compulsory work packages anymore. Each work package we hope would contain as many activities and deliverables as you might need. So there's no real limit there. For each work package, the application form has to define a specific objective. We also like to see communications activities and listing of target audience to reach. We're hoping this time that the communications activities would be planned in each work package actually. So it's compulsory indeed to have at least one activity for communications in each work package. And as I kind of mentioned there, the long-term effects must be planned as activities as well inside the work packages as appropriate. So it's not compulsory to have a long-term effects activity in every work package. And then maybe another one that people like to check is about project management. So project management would be described as a separate section. So it's not a standalone work package. It's just more of a concept focusing on the key concepts of how the project management would be described in a strategic manner for the proposal. Probably those details on work packages come more into play at step 2.
Okay, I actually do have another question from Abigail in relation to step 2, and she's wondering what the deadline is for the step for step 2. Do we have an idea of that?
Yes. It's the whole time frame of the call 1 is in the terms of reference, which is a document which has been uploaded on our website. So I advise everyone to have a look at these terms of reference where you're going to find all the details. But to answer directly the question, it's going to be the 15th of December, the deadline for step 2. And we hope to have a decision taken by member states towards the end of February, which means, and I think this is important for the planning of applicants, which means that project activities, if you're approved, can start immediately after the monitoring committee decision towards the end of February.
Okay. I have another question in from Antoinette. Can you advise whether the administrative burden will be reduced for the forthcoming period compared to previous programs?
Yeah.
Would like to take
Alexander, shall I?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe, okay, so Alexander, feel free to jump in if you have points to add. But yes, I think the idea is that, yes, there'll be a greater use of what we call simplified cost options. So that's where you have your budget and the other elements of the budget will be calculated as a percentage. So that helps you to, and then we wouldn't be auditing every single item, but rather a percentage-based audit of sample size. So I think that should be helpful for institutions in terms of simplification and in terms of reporting back to the EU. Alexandra, you might, since you were around longer than I, you might have more to add.
No, I think that's the main aspect. I would say the simplification, we've really put our efforts on 2 aspects: the reporting part through the simplified cost options, indeed, and then the other aspect is just in the application process. The experienced applicants might see that in step 1 we are asking for less details on especially long-term effects, for example. We're not asking for baselines. So I think this simplifies the process for many applicants. Yeah, so yeah, these are the main 2 directions in which we've tried to simplify the application process on one side and the claiming cost reporting aspects.
Excellent. I have another question in from Ronan. He wants to know, can you elaborate on what up to 3 project-specific objectives means, with some sort of an example maybe?
Yes, so that would be for your own project. So we have, the terminology can be confusing, that's for sure. So we refer all the time to the specific objectives of the cohesion policy. So that's the drop-down menu that you have to choose one, for example, biodiversity or energy efficiency. So that's the specific objective of framework within which your project fits. Then your own project design that you work together with the other partners in 2 other countries and so on. You come together and you think, okay, we want to make a difference in this sector. How can we build a project that will really achieve change? And to do that, you come together and you design your own project objectives. And that, like in any project design that you've done for, you know, other grant funding that you might have received in the past, you know, you're looking for it to be measurable, to be specific, something that's very feasible, that you can achieve within the time frame of the project. And that's really, really where your creativity comes in. So it's up to you. Try and make it as reasonable and realistic, but also ambitious. So yeah, we look forward to seeing interesting projects with 3 key goals, 3 specific objectives of your own design.
Okay, I have another question in from Janetta. She just wants to clarify regarding the submission of multiple applications. Must each application submitted by an organisation address a different specific objective? So I suppose
it's really it's not a case that we're used to, so that's why maybe my answer was not perfectly clear, but it's possible, and within a same priority, within the same specific objectives, yes, potentially you can have one same organization proposing 2 different projects. Yes, there's nothing that keeps you from doing this in our program manual or in any rules or regulation that we have.
Okay.
As long as the project makes sense, the objective is clear, the partnerships are in line with the objectives. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question in from Margaret. Can more than one Irish partner join together in partnership across 2 other EU partner countries?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Short answer to a quick question. I have another question in from Antoinette. With regard to the 40% co-funding element, can you advise what the co-fund element might be? Give some examples of what Irish partners did in the past. Can it be a percentage of permanent staff time or a combination of elements, as 40% can be quite challenging for organisations?
Well, concerning the match funding, we've had this question quite often, and there might be a misunderstanding on the whole way it functions. I think what really applicants need to understand is that when their project is 100% of the cost, we're not financing, and the application are not 60% of a project. A project is 100%. Just to take an example, if your project is to build a house, you're going to claim 100% of the cost linked to building this house, and we will reimburse 60% of these costs, as long as they're eligible, of course. And this you have to check with the program manual. But I mean, so any cost, whether it's staff costs, whether it's external expertise, whether it's travel and accommodation linked to building this house, in this example, can be claimed, and we will reimburse 60% of that of the total amount.
Okay. We've had a question in to ask whether Northern Ireland can be included, but I think you've already addressed that, Alexandra, to say unfortunately not. Not
well,
as
Northern
a partner.
Ireland, the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe as an associate partner, but not as a full partner in the program.
Exactly.
We've also had a number of people asking, not only will the slides be made available after the event today, but will also the recording be available, and where would people find it, as they think some of their colleagues who might not have been able to make it today might benefit from hearing this?
Yeah, so the recording will be available. The slides will be shared with all the participants. The recording and the slides will be available on the Southern Regional Assembly website at a date soon in the future.
Would you maybe send out a communication to those who attended as when it actually goes live on the website, maybe, so that
Yes,
people
of course,
can
we will, yeah.
share it with their colleagues then at that point?
May I just add one thing? Yes, on the match funding, I just wanted to come back on this because it's really a question that we've had very often. We're working internally within the JS on a Q&A document that will be on our website early next week, and within this Q&A, we will have a big part dedicated to everything related to match funding. So with examples, and I think this will be helpful. So keep an eye on our website. By next Wednesday, there will be a section dedicated to match funding.
Well, thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Rose, for monitoring the chat. Maybe we didn't get to all the questions, but I do think that the match will come back up again now, as we are going to hear from our colleagues from previous success. Let's start now with the first-hand experience of a well-seasoned project partner, the Three Counties Energy Agency, represented today by Michael Doran. Michael is the EU Projects Manager for Three Counties Energy Agency. He has vast experience in the renewables and innovation sectors, and he has been project lead in several EU-funded Interreg projects. He's also a chartered surveyor and a chartered environmentalist, and he was a director of Bioenergy Europe, the European Biomass Association, and he was a founding member and director of the Irish Bioenergy Association. So we're very lucky to have you here today, Michael, to share your experiences and advice and tips for future applicants. So I'll let you take away. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you very much. I'm just going to run through what I'm going to talk about today on the agenda. So next slide, please, Catherine. I'll very briefly describe who 3CEA are, and I'll do that now. 3CEA is an energy agency with offices in Kilkenny and Waterford. We're not for profit, we're not centrally funded, we support ourselves, and we've been involved in European projects for about 3 years. I've been with 3CEA for 2 years, and I'll talk about the experiences both of what we've been doing within Northwest Europe. I've also been involved in other Interreg projects for approximately 20 years, over a total of about 15 or 16 different projects. So I'll talk very much about that. Probably one of the reasons that Sarah asked me to talk today is that I'm very enthusiastic about Interreg projects, and particularly Northwest Europe. And that's probably why she's asked me to speak. But against that, I would say right at the moment, both Sarah and Rose are sitting in trepidation, worried about what I might actually say, because I'm not talking on behalf of the program itself. I'm giving very much a user's view. So I may say things that don't necessarily align with what they would like me to say, but I'm afraid that they're just going to have to live with me on that. Running again down through the content, I'm going to run through, we've got 4 projects at the moment, and I'm going to talk very briefly about those. I'm going to talk about the application process. I know that that has changed slightly, and I'll reflect that in the talk today. I'll talk a little bit about the transnational element and the long-term effects, because that, I think, is where you're going to have the most difficulty in putting your project together. I'll talk about the relationship with the contact points, and then I'll also talk about our experiences and how those might help you going forwards. Next slide, please. These are 3 of the projects. I'm going to run through these very quickly, and then the 4th project I'll take a little bit more time to talk about. So at the moment, 3CEA are running with 4 Interreg Northwest Europe projects. The first 3 are Reg Energy, STEPS, and Climate Active Neighbourhoods. I'll run through them very briefly. Within the 5 pillars that Alexander was talking about earlier on, obviously all 5 fit into the energy transition. We're an energy efficiency company, and this is where we naturally fit. So within the first project, Reg Energy, which is focused on biogas, and it's looking particularly at how to produce biogas in a rural location and use it in an urban consumption. It's due for completion in June, so we've got another 2 months to run in this one. We have done a series of reports both on how to develop gas and how to develop the network to distribute it. We've been working with another Irish partner based down in Portlaw in County Waterford, which is Ormond Organics. And our total budget within this project is about €650,000 over the 3 years. Second project is STEPS, and this is looking about energy storage. It's an unusual project in that we are able to give out vouchers from the project which assist SMEs who are not full partners. So it's a slightly unusual one. The other Irish partners within that are Galway Energy Co-op and Galway University, NUIG. Again, total budget within that one about 550,000. The third one I'm going to talk about very briefly, which has just started about 9 months ago, is called CANCAP, Climate Action Neighbourhoods. This is a follow-on from a previous Northwest Europe project, which was called CAN, and Kilkenny was not involved in the previous one. We were asked to come into this project, even though we weren't in the first one. This one is mainly looking at providing audits for SMEs. Next slide, please, Catherine. This one I'm going to go into a little bit more detail because we've had difficulties within this project, and I think the difficulties that we have had might help you a little bit to understand the support that you get both from the Secretariat and from the Southern Regional Assembly. So this is one looking at social housing. The original intention was that we would put social housing units into 3 counties, into Carlow, Kilkenny and Wexford. For various reasons, Wexford have not been able to deliver on that. And it's not the fault of Wexford Council. The reason that there's been a change is the site which we had selected to put the social houses on, they've since decided to densify the site, which means that they're putting additional units on the house, on the site, so they can't use the original design. So unfortunately, they've had to withdraw. Within this project, the project's also been quite severely affected by COVID in that the development of the houses on site, as all of our lives have been changed over the last 2 years, have also been, the progress on site has been delayed. We were originally, as I've said, supposed to be doing 3 pilot sites, 1 in Carlow, 1 in Kilkenny, 1 in Wexford. We're now proceeding with Carlow and Kilkenny. They're both on site, but they're also late. So even though this project has already received an extension of time of 6 months, we've now had to apply for a further extension of time, which has been granted. So this project has a further extension of time for another 9 months. So it will only be finishing in March of 2023. So this is the one that I want to highlight, was because when we took this back to the Secretariat and to the contact point, they were very accommodating in seeing the importance of allowing the project to extend, to allow us to deliver, to cope with problems which were unforeseeable when we started the project. So it's something, I'm not saying that you're always going to get an extension of time, but we have always found within the Interreg projects that where you have made a genuine attempt to complete something, and for reasons beyond your control, it doesn't happen, they're a very good listening system, and they will help and try and help you out of the problem. Okay, next slide, please. Right, this one is into the applications. Now, the application process, I appreciate, has changed. We've now got a step 1 and a step 2, which in my opinion is a very good idea. The applications are relatively straightforward. Alexandra has already taken you through when the window opens and when the window closes, and we're probably on 9-month or 12-month application periods. Difference between a lead partner and a partner. If you have not been involved in an Interreg project before, I would advise you not to go in initially as a lead partner. There is too much to understand and too many things can go wrong. So I would advise you to go in as a partner if you're interested. Forming the consortium is important. And Sarah has already talked about the online application community. That is very helpful. You will also find the Southern Regional Assembly very helpful in putting a consortium together. You have to use your own feeling about whether you are in a good consortium. From experience, because I've had a couple of horrors, I can tell you, if you've got a poor lead partner, you will struggle from day one, and the project will have difficulties, partly created by the lead partner, which will run through the partnership. If when you're putting a consortium together, you get the impression that one or two of your partners are not going to deliver, then my advice to you is to try and remove them from the consortium earlier rather than later. This doesn't mean that you go in on a hatchet job and get rid of people that you don't like, but what it does mean is that you go forwards with a consortium and that you're happy. You'll find when you're putting the details together, whether you're the lead partner or not, that when you're trying to put the application together, people are looking for deadlines. So they'll say things like, okay, first draft by the 1st of May. If you're finding that one of your consortium partners is continually late or not producing what they're supposed to, look seriously at whether you want them in, because carrying a poor partner through a project can be very frustrating. As Sarah has already talked about, the tasks are divided up into work packages, so they're clearly identified pieces of work. When you're putting the application together, there is a considerable amount of work in it, but if you go about it in a very structured way with a proper project management approach with deadlines and targets, it is a lot easier. Important when you're putting the application together, don't overcommit. So it doesn't matter which stream you're going into, you will have to have what's called deliverables within that. So if it's housing, it'll be the number of housing units. If it's social change, it'll be the number of organizations you've engaged with. If it's whatever, it will have measurables. Don't get carried away by putting down numbers like how many organizations are you going to interact with over the project timeline. And you go, well, we'll stick in 600. And then you find out that you've only got 50 after the first 2 years. You've got to be realistic in what you put in. And the last one is last minute panic. It is normal that there is a last minute panic, particularly with a new consortium that you have not worked with together, which is that in the last week, everybody piles everything in. Try to avoid it, but it's not always avoidable. Next slide, please. Transnational element. This is very important. I'm going to run through what the good and bad aspects of this are. As I've already said, choose carefully. It's important who you partner with. And it's important that, I'm going down onto the 4th line now, the balance between mentoring and learning. If you have a project where one of the partners knows everything and the other partners are only benefiting from that one partner, you have an imbalanced project. What you want throughout your project, both in its development and in its delivery, is an input from all of the partners to learn from each other. And it's this transnational element which all of the speakers have been talking about before, which is really important. David was talking about being creative and sharing problems. That's what INTERREG is about. It's about solving problems on a collaborative way. Yesterday, I was reviewing the final document for one of the 4 projects that I was talking about yesterday. Sorry, that I presented earlier on. And the document's about 38 pages long. It's a summary of what we have done. And they've asked us, obviously because we're native English speakers, to do a language check. And it was only when I was actually reading this 38-page document that I realized how much work we have done within the project and how effective that project has been. So one of the things you're looking at is the transnational element, and it's important, it's also fun. And I'm not supposed to say this, but you should enjoy what you're doing. And I have to say, having to travel to Slovenia or to the Netherlands or to northern Spain to go to a project meeting and share problems is fun. One of the things you need to look at within your project application is how much travel you put in versus remote meetings, which we've had over the last 2 years, because that reduces your carbon footprint. Long-term effects, as I said at the very beginning of this presentation, is probably the most difficult thing to address, because they're looking for deliverability after the project has finished. So about 6 or 7 years ago, Interreg projects brought in this concept of sustainability. It's not the way that we would normally understand the pillars of sustainability. It's talking about sustainability of the project after the project term has finished. Because just something as simple as, how do you maintain a website? Who is going to pay for the maintenance of that website after the financing has finished? So it's something I could talk about for the next 20 minutes on its own. Be very considerate of how you develop the long-term effects and how you can support them. And that is the critical bit. You can achieve things within the project, but very often it's the effects that the project has after the project term is finished, which are the most important. Next slide, please. Contact points. You already know who the Irish contact points are. The only one I'm going to roll in here is the audit function, first level control. Sarah has already mentioned that this audit function will reduce slightly. A lot of people fear first level control. They're coming in to check that you have followed the procedures. If you have followed the procedures, you won't have an issue. If you have gone off and have not followed procurement procedures, you may well have a problem. So the rules are there if you follow them. Next slide, please. You'll be glad to hear this is my last slide. Just going to run through a quick summary of what I've already said and to point you in the right direction. Align the project with your objectives. If you're going to do something anyway, so for instance, 3CEA, for whom I work, are involved in energy efficiency. If we're trying to develop an energy efficiency program in one of our local authority areas, why would we not take 60% funding to assist us to do that through a European project which has partners, some of whom know more than we do? Secondly, as I've already said, don't overcommit on the application. Certainly make it challenging, but don't put in crazy numbers that you can't deliver on. I love acronyms. So one of the fun parts of putting the project together is to get a snappy acronym which you can use for the next 3 years. You usually get 60% funding. So one of the questions that we had earlier on is, where does the other 40% come from? This goes back to aligning the project with your objectives. If you're already going to do something and you have to do it anyway to deliver it within your organization, you've got options. You can get match funding from outside your organization. You can take match funding from within your organization, or you can have what's called complementarity, which is that the actions which you're delivering within the project complement what you're doing anyway. That is not the same as double funding, but it means that you can use this activity within the project to help on things that you would have been doing anyway. Next one's interesting, 25% overall revenue. This is my advice. The EU Commission, the Secretariat will never tell you this. If you are involved in a lot of European projects and the value of those European projects exceeds 25% of your overall company revenue, you are probably in trouble, because you will create cash flow problems for yourself, and you will also be trying to match fund too much. So if you've got an organization with a turnover of €1 million a year, €1 million a year, if you're bringing in more than €250,000 of that through an Interreg project, you're getting yourselves into a difficult position. The deliverability is obviously dependent on the quality of the partnership, which is why it's important to get it right at the beginning. Don't underestimate the fun that you can have within the project, talking to people who have a different perspective, who live in a different country. But overall, I would say, and this is back on my enthusiasm platform, I have found the INTERREG project really useful. They're really useful for the organizations and for the communities in which we live. And the one thing I would say, there've been a few questions already about no more UK partners. That has actually increased the demand for Irish partners, because most partnerships, most projects want an English-speaking partner who can help improve the English in the delivery of the project. So I hope there's nobody on this call from 3CEA, but within 3CEA, the demand for 3CEA's input into projects has gone up considerably in the last 2 years. It is over those 2 years that I joined 3CEA. So the people in 3CEA think that there's a demand for our services because I'm involved. It's actually got nothing to do with me or my deliverability on the project. It's the fact that we're an English-speaking partner and there is a greater demand for English-speaking partners within the project. That's me. Thank you very much indeed. And Catherine, thank you very much for helping me with this. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Michael. Actually, I'm going to pass straight over to Rose, who might have a few questions from the chat.
Thank you very much, Michael. Oh, we've lost Michael's camera. There you go. I think that was very useful and beneficial for all the participants here today, very much given them the practical experience that you've had. We have a couple of questions in for you. The first one is that, and I think you kind of touched on it in your presentation, Michael, but somebody wanted to know, how did you make up the match funding? Could you give an example on one of the projects that you're involved in?
Yeah, sure. Okay, match funding, most of the match funding that we make up within 3CEA is from our own funds. So we match fund directly from other projects. So if we're doing a project on, and I'll take Reg Energy. Reg Energy is looking at developing biogas in our region. We decided that the only way that we could do this was to analyze what's the potential to develop biogas, who could use it, and what is the demand for it. So we needed an assessment survey. So we, 3CEA, were going to have to do that anyway. That was going to cost us about €25,000, and we knew this 4 years ago. So we then went into the project. We have got, it's cost us about €25,000 to do that, but we've got 60% of that back. If we hadn't been in the project, we would have had to have funded that on behalf of the local authorities or on behalf of somebody else. So it's work that we were going to do anyway, and we funded it. Now, you can get match funding from people like local authorities. It takes a little bit longer to line up, because if you go to a local authority and say, right, guys, we're putting in an application into this project. We don't know if it's going to be successful, but we want you, the local authority, Kilkenny Council, we want you to say you'll give us €20,000 match funding. And they're going, yeah, well, have you got the project? And we go, no, we're only putting the project application in now, we don't know. So there's a difficulty. And then when you go back to them, they could be in a different funding year. So it's possible, but it's more difficult, for instance, to get funding from local authorities.
I think what you're trying to say there, Michael, as well, is that not to be chasing projects. Look at what you're trying to do internally in your organization and then find the project that may help you develop that.
Rose, that's critical, and thank you very much for highlighting that. Don't go off and invent a project because it fits the project definition or the program definition. Find something that you need to do anyway, and then get the INTERREG project to help you with it. Good point, Rose.
Okay, I have a question in here from Paul. How do you square work we were going to do anyway with additionality?
Again, good question. If you want to be a lying cheat, then you can try and double up and get double funding, so you can get work which you were going to do that somebody else is going to fund. You get Interreg to do it at the same time. That is illegal, and I would advise you not to do it. What you do is you work out what are you going to do, and what elements of that can be assisted through the Interreg project. You will get 60% to assist you to do that. So it's a matter of identifying what you're going to do, breaking it down into chunks, and see which chunks are attributable to the Interreg project.
Okay, I think we have other questions, but we're kind of running out of time. We might see if we can address some of those at the end. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Rose.
You're on mute, Sarah. You're on mute, Sarah.
Excuse me. Thank you, Michael, for a very honest, warts and all kind of presentation. I think it's very beneficial for future applicants to hear these kind of experiences. So yeah, we're very grateful, and maybe we'll get around to those outstanding questions. So now our next speaker brings a slightly different point of view. He represents indeed the lead partner in a consortium. John Prendergast, or JP, is the project manager of the Bioeconomy consortium, which is led by the University of Limerick. John is also the lead on the work package for optimizing product development of willow residues within that project, and he has a scientific background, including a PhD in natural compounds, and he's also a founder at Epithel Limited. So thanks, JP, for joining us today and for sharing your experiences. So I'll let you go ahead and share your slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is JP Prendergast. I'm representing University of Limerick here, actually the Bioeconomy project today. My approach will be somewhat the journey we took to get here, what the project is about, and maybe one or two things in the process of the application of issues we ran into, we overcame, and also then, how the project is going. So the basis to which we started this project was initially, if we go on to the next slide there, please, Catherine, just the basis to which we looked at this project was 5 years ago, myself and Professor J.J. Leahy had a conversation in university about the circular economy. We were specifically interested in what we call zero waste circular economy, whereby everything is used for its benefit and no waste is associated with any type of maximum process of manufacture or process or product. My initial interest in the project was willow tree, and Bioeconomy is based on the willow tree. We would have an argument that growing willow as an energy crop would perhaps not give us the best from that crop from its own capabilities, and could we develop a project around the tree specifically, and specifically the bark of the tree. My interest in the project was a thing called salicin. So salicin is the basis of the bark, or part of the bark of the willow tree. And for those who are into the historical element of the years gone by, monasteries used to grow willow tree around their buildings, whereby they would take the bark from the willow and it would be salicin, which is natural aspirin. So it was a natural medicine in the tree itself. Our own company for the last probably 10 years has been involved in extracts of using salicylic acid, which is a form of salicin, for natural aspirin. So for replacement, for a number of our research products is a replacement product from natural material for antibiotics. In talking to JJ, we looked very quickly at what we call the European Bioeconomy Strategy document in 2018, where we looked at the circular elements. So when I say circular, it means that everything is used from beginning to end. So we have no waste within the circular economy, and how we could strengthen that within just the commercial element, but also in the society. But a big thing for us was rural Ireland, and how we would look at the support of rural Ireland and communities, and could we develop a mechanism for the farming communities. And this is one of the drivers under the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as we call them, SDGs. So then we formed a project. Initially in our conversation, we formed the concept at Bioeconomy. So Catherine, if we go on to the next slide, it's a small bit overwhelming, so I'm going to start you off very slowly on this project. Limerick UL are the leaders of this project. It's a 3.7 million euro project. We lead the project with another 10 partners in it. The project actually started, if you look at the diagram, the bottom left-hand side of the diagram, that's where the concept started. We, as a company, had an interest in topical applications for dermatitis using salicin from willow tree. But very quickly, as you can see, the idea started to grow by talking to various partners within Europe and Ireland and how you would look at the material that we use within the project. So, for example, smack in the middle there, you'll see Kevin standing between willow tree there. We started talking to the European Landowner Association and AFBI, which is the kind of the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, and how we would grow different varieties of willow. And from that, we looked at how farmers may look at growing willow from a different aspect as a cooperative, perhaps getting the added benefits of what's within the willow tree rather than burning it. So very quickly, if you follow the little blue line that goes along the side there, you have where a farmer grows the willow. He then looks at debarking that willow, so we take the bark off that willow, and that willow then is allowed to go as left-hand side for us, for example, in extracting salicins and different elements from the bark. But the remaining material, if you follow the main blue line, goes along to what debarked willow pulp is. We then formed a mechanism working with the Bangor University of forming degradable or biodegradable food catering products. So we would use the main parts of the willow tree for forming what we call degradable or biodegradable trays. And the reason why we had an interest in this was twofold. One, because if we use it for packaging for fruit or for vegetables, we would then have at the end of its shelf life a mechanism by which we could enter or use this material as a feedstock for anaerobic digestion. And the reason we were interested in this was, could we break down that packaging with the foods? In other words, remove any kind of plastics from the process and move that straight into what we call an anaerobic digestion tank, to which we would form a biogas or an energy source. And that waste material then will become a digestate, which is like a natural fertilizer with the farmers. And that then will be used on the ground as a fertilizer, and hey presto, we're right back to where Kevin is again, growing our willow again. So this is what we call a circular economy. This is called a circular presentation, what the project is. But along the way, what you see is we started introducing partners into the project. So what we found was Martina Nova, for example, were very much into what we call the life cycle analysis, understanding how the project worked, for example, how we costed the project and the impact it had both in the carbon footprint, but on its financials. And we worked our way along the way, so we involved Bangor University, Crops for Energy, and as we got towards the anaerobic digestion side, we worked with Gas Networks Ireland, the MARI Research Institute in Cork, but we also worked with the likes of the Renewable Gas Forum and the university itself. So in this became our concept. This became the concept of the project. And so very quickly you would see that the project itself had many partners which were very specific in their delivery to the project itself. And in doing so, we were able to form a working document to say this is what we wanted to present to the INTERREG project itself. So if we go on to the next slide, Catherine, for a second, I'll go through the next 3 stages of what we actually, the process by which we made our application and what we did. Having an idea of the project concept, in other words, understanding the elements of what the project was, we were able to go then to the INTERREG, attend the INTERREG NWE info session, some similar to what we're doing here. And we want to find out, was this a project which was suitable to the program itself? After speaking with the guys here in Ireland and also in Europe, we found that the concept itself on stage 1 was a good idea. Yeah, and it had certain elements that had to be corrected, but it was in principle was a good idea. So what we did was we prepared on our stage 1 what at the time was a 3-page document with illustrations, specifically showing what the project was about, specifically showing who the partners would be in the project within reason, but not having all the project's partners, showing within reason what we thought the budget might be and what the outcome of the project may be. So this is what we did in our project concept. The interesting part about this was the feedback, because it's the first time that UL, I think, led in a project. So it was the first time myself and JJ had to write a project in regards to leading the project. And also it was quite a unique one whereby it was quite diverse in its application. So then I suppose we met with INTERREG, the national contact partner, Sarah and the guys, and we looked at the project itself. And very quickly, I think we were, I suppose, geared along the way of looking at a leader-follower approach. In other words, that we become leaders of the project. We would manage the project, and we would then associate the partners accordingly with it. So we found very quickly that some of the partners we had maybe initially thought was ideal for the project weren't ideal for the project. The NCP were very good. I think the first thing was identifying partners. In other words, there's certainly a lot of experience here in Ireland in Interreg, and I suppose contacts in existing projects. And so we were introduced to a number of projects, which was key to the success of our project. And I think from the first stage, on the national contact partner and the guys here, and Southern Assembly, it was critical that we communicate with them and understand the impact of what we're trying to do, but also shape the project in a meaningful way which would deliver a project realistically. So we then went on to meet the various partners. So we had a number of virtual meetings with partners. We had every step pretty much assigned to an individual group. We then assigned then of our partners 3 lead partners, which would take on 3 work packages. So our 3 work packages, main work packages, one was we're going to grow 34 varieties of willow in both Ireland, Northern Ireland and France on 3 different sites. And we would then harvest that willow over a 3-year period to understand how much salicin we would recover, and then have feedstock for the individual partners to then do the research in. Once we got the partners on board and probably selecting the most appropriate partners and budgets, we necessarily didn't go into massive detail for stage 1, but for that we had a good understanding how realistic the project was. We submitted stage 1 application, and thankfully at the time it was extremely successful, and we got an outcome successful to it, led to stage 2. So Catherine, I get to stage 2 there. So stage 2 was interesting. It was a few late nights writing this application, and it did take us three months to write this application, 3 to 4 months to actually write the application. Both of us took on roles and responsibilities within it. JJ would have attended the first meeting. So after stage 1 applicants, you were then invited over to Lille to meet the Interreg folks over there and look at the project itself. And there we would meet then our DA, which is our direct access, direct point of contact. We had Eva Clemens, who's a super DA. I mean, you just won't get any better. Forgiving but very strict, understanding, but you only get a certain bit of leeway to make mistakes. So these guys are here to help you. This is their job. They're here to help you. They're here to direct you. As with the assembly, the guys in Lille were very much as helpful, and both groups were extremely positioned in our application. What we did find out was the consortium. What type of consortium did we have? And Mike made the point here on is that if you have a wrong mix of partners there that maybe are crossing over or perhaps not delivering, it does become an issue of trying to get reports done and trying to get budgets done, and that's something to consider. But the balanced consortium, we tried to go with people who already were in Interreg. So we knew they had experience of it, and they had the knowledge of putting an application or being part of an Interreg project. We took the leader-follower approach, whereby UL would take on the lead, which was a lot of work, and is a lot of work, but very fruitful in what we're getting from it. And then we looked at the budget breakdown. At this stage, then we would have had a number of meetings with the partners and understanding what their tasks and what their needs were. And again, it goes back to the point made earlier, is this is part of their work. This is part of their daily work. It's not something outside to raise a funding. You're only getting 60% of your budget here, but it fits into the business of the partner. And for that reason, not only does the Interreg support the business of the partner, but it enhances and improves the ability, the knowledge, and also the activities within that organization to the benefit of that organization, but also to the benefit of all the partners. And one thing to be wary of here is that, for example, if we form some type of intellectual property in this program, it is now shared amongst the partners. There's no legitimate ownership specific of anything found in the program belongs to the partner. If we generate new IP during the program, it belongs to all the partners and is shared accordingly. And the second point is that this is open information. Research is open to the general public. So from that point of view, one of the points I would make is to be very careful in your commitment to the project, that it doesn't conflict with your core business. Specifically in our case, where we would have IP specifically to what we're doing in the pharmaceutical sector, we have to be very careful with that. So I think it would be very I think I suggest taking time for your partners and you as individuals in understanding that as this program develops and helps your business develop, just to be careful it doesn't conflict with specifically IP owned by your business that would feed into this. In having partner meetings with the partners within to our budgets, each partner defined their own budget. We said, look, what do you need? How much do you need? And you do understand that you have to raise 40% of that, which they were all aware of. They would have then come back to us with individual reports and what their needs are. We then started forming the document itself. One of our problems that occurred was we had a key partner involved in the project was bringing a full leadership, actually was bringing a lead on one of the work packages, dropped out a week before our submission. We don't know why they dropped out, but it caused immense difficulty because immediately we had to find a substitute. And I think under the guidance of the Southern Assembly and our DA over our help with Ava, very quickly we found a partner, and very quickly with their support, and I mean support, we were able to readjust the application and overcome the problem. And this is where the NCP was so important to us in our application. Writing the application is a process. It's an online submission. We actually submitted first time and we failed, believe it or not, because one of the issues we did was when you submit your application, it has to be also in French, German, I think in Dutch. We didn't realize this to the last minute, so we did a Google Translate, and somehow we don't think the Google Translate translated exactly to the English version, and so it came back a little bit confused, I think, from the version what we submitted. So again, when we resubmitted, we overcame that problem and we were ready for that. But the application is quite detailed. The budgets are quite detailed. Within the budgets, you are then assigning a capital cost. You're assigning a cost against salaries, an expense. You do have to include costs for your FLC, first level controller. So as a partner, you have to get your submission audited, and this is where the guys come in and the NCP, and you have to make sure you include that cost within your submission, and that's something we actually realized at the end to include. But again, working with the NCP on a constant basis in Ava, we overcame these problems pretty quickly. So anyways, we submitted stage 2. The submission time was 12 o'clock European time, 11 o'clock Irish. We got our submission in at 10:58, to which I think Ava was sending emails like no tomorrow saying, where is it, you have 1 minute left to get your submission in. So that was an interesting application, but it was a massive sigh of relief because the project we knew was quite strong, our partners were quite strong, and I think from the point of view of what we wanted to do here, we knew we had something good. So if we go on to the next slide, Catherine, stage 2 submission. I've probably gone through a lot of this already. You do this online, as you know, but one of the questions that's been asked already was your matched funding. So normally within an organization, it's part of your day-to-day business. So what you're really doing is you're supplementing or you're complementing that business with this research money. Part for us in the UL, as UL, part of this project was, it was outside of some of our budgetary allowances. So we went and looked for matched funding for UL specifically. And in doing so, we actually applied to the Gas Innovation Fund, whereby we raised, I think, $250,000 for our project to match some of that money, and that then was included in our submission to Europe. So, you know, one of the things to do here is to consider, and a point made very earlier and very good point, was that if, you know, there is a 40% request there, and you have to have proof of payments. When I say proof of payment, it is that the money is spent, where it came from, and that the FLC can actually justify and assign that accordingly. So, you know, if you feel as an organization you don't have that 40%, it may be advisable to see, can you partner with an alternative group such as an organization? The point made earlier, in our case, we matched with Gas Networks Ireland and we got that funding. Point to make here before a submission is just communicate. You are not requested to know everything. We didn't know everything, but the guys did, and from that means you just ask questions on a constant basis and the answers are always there. So from the Assembly's point of view, it was fantastic. Ava and Lille was fantastic. Any questions we asked, they answered, they clarified, and they were for the good of the project. Ironically, they were there for the project, not just for the fund. They're there for the project and for the Irish participants specifically. So then I think the next slide, Catherine, I think. Yeah, so Yeah, so then we actually got confirmation that we'd won the submission. We had run into a problem on that at the time, whereby we'd a problem with one of the elements of the capital costs, which we had to change on the terms. That actually held us up by 6 months. So even though the project started in September, it was actually March. I see you, Sarah, I'm on the way. So basically, from the point of view, we had to make sure that that was changed. One of the things to be very careful of, and took a lot of time, because we deal with the likes of gas networks and this and councils, is that there is what we call the declarations or aid declarations. That becomes difficult. And also signing the contracts becomes difficult because, for example, the onus on individuals, if a partner pulls out, it is the onus of the partners to take responsibility for any loss made because of that partner. It is really important to get legal advice on your contracts before you sign. It did take us nearly 3 months to get our partners to sign fully and get that done, so be wary of that. So our project kicked off in 2020, March, and then COVID. University closed down, everything closed down. So what had to happen, we have actually had to extend our project by a year till the end of next year. Our project has been extended. And for that reason, it's interesting. And just to finish up here, Sarah, just one point is, this is the real interesting part, is even though the project is structured and you've got your concepts and your ideas and your partners and your deliverables, one of the things we haven't realized was in our research, and we were doing the commercial application, we found that the packaging itself has salicin in it, right? And what we found as a consortium, that this is a preservative in the packaging. Suddenly Iceland have now come on as associate partner for packaging of their fruits and vegetables, because the packaging not only is a package, but it's now a preservative which will extend the shelf life of the product. That is a consequence of this INTERREG project. Because we had everyone around the table discussing this came from nowhere. And this has been a massive win for this project outside of everything else we're doing. And so I would say to everyone here, it's what you make of this project, right? There is absolutely admin part to it, a nightmare in times, but that's our fault because we should be better at doing it. So from our point of view, we are getting better, and with the help of the guys. But this is a really great opportunity to make sure that that this will deliver to you a project, but beyond the project, something positive for both your organization and for INTERREG. And so for that reason, I would compliment and thank the guys for all their help, and I think INTERREG itself and NWE is fantastic. So thank you.
You're on mute, Sarah. Thank you very much, JP, for your presentation. I think that was very beneficial and useful to our participants. I'm going to go straight in, just for time purposes, into questions. We have a first question from Rini, who is a small team or a small organization, and do you think that they should be leading a project, and are there any guidelines in terms of ratio between research and admin for this, for leading a project?
Yeah, I would be very careful to lead.
Your opinion, John, JP.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. I'd be very careful to lead initially. I think that it would be good, and I think the point made earlier, that it would be good to have some experience of INTERREG first and understanding the complications within this. But once you have a good admin person there who understands the process, there's no limitation to leading a project. I think it's more the confidence within the company, the organization, but also I think with the assembly that they are confident that the organization will deliver. And that's a communication thing, really. That's really just sitting down and understanding capabilities. So I wouldn't say, I think any organization could lead this as long as you've got the resources to do the work and the understanding of the complexities of it. But I think point made earlier, in fairness, was that maybe going in as a partner initially would be a good experience to understand the process and what's involved here first. I think as regards to the budgets, I think it's fixed at 15% plus whatever.
Very good.
I have another question.
Rose, sorry, Rose, I'm just going to stop you there. We'll just call time on it. Thank you, John, for a really insightful session, and it's so helpful to learn from others that have been in the lead in an international consortium like that. It can be daunting. We're going to move next.
Before we go to the next speaker, Sarah, sorry to interrupt you,
yes.
But maybe any of the questions we don't get to today, that we might direct those questions to our presenters and then maybe feedback the answers directly to the submissions.
Okay, thank you, Rose, and thank you for your help monitoring the chat. I've been working very hard in the background, so thank you. I just maybe before we pass to the conclusions, our director, David Kelly, might give us a few thoughts. I'd just like to maybe reiterate that in relation to that 40% match funding, so both colleagues shared very useful first-hand experience there, but I'd like to just highlight the importance of reviewing the document that will be shared on our website next week. Alexandra mentioned it. There will be a frequently asked questions document, and that will go into much greater detail on the rules and indeed the overall concept of this match funding, this 40%. And you can also contact me as the national contact point with these types of specific concerns as your project progresses. So please don't be shy to reach out. So now perhaps we'll return to David. So if you have your camera ready, David. He's the director at the Regional Assembly. Perhaps you have a few thoughts that you'd like to share on what we heard today, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sarah. And I suppose at one level, I feel a bit guilty cutting in on very interesting and insightful discussions and conversations. And I suppose the first thing, look, I suppose just if just seeing the level of interest and interaction and the number of questions and so forth that have been coming forward, if that kind of reflects the level of interest from Irish partners in the North West Europe programme for the next round, I think we can be quite confident that, look, there will be a huge number of applications, and hopefully we'll also get a really good return for Irish partners in the next time round as well. Maybe just a couple of quick reflections. I suppose, first of all, just maybe kind of something we touched on earlier on this morning, if we kind of reflect back on the origins of Interreg or international cooperation across Europe and the basis of it, really to try and build trust across European countries after the wars and the conflict and so on, and really look at how we can build that solidarity. And I think, again, as we touched on this morning, in the current global environment with the geopolitical situation, with Brexit, with the sad and devastating situation in Ukraine, I think that need for building trust across borders, for solidarity, for cooperation is no more important than it is now. And I think cohesion policy has always played a crucial role in that, and European territorial cooperation and Interreg, and it will continue to play an important role in that. Not only, I suppose, for our economic growth and prosperity and the benefits that it has brought to that, but that whole solidarity piece. I was at the 8th Cohesion Forum in Brussels a couple of weeks back, and Commissioner Ferreira spoke about, again, the value of cohesion policy, but particularly around I think what she said was bridging the gaps and avoiding the traps. So bridging the gaps of the regional disparities, but also using cohesion policy to avoid the traps of further disparities through the transition to low carbon economy and so on and so forth. So it has that wide ranging function. And again, I think European territorial cooperation and in particular North West Europe can play a massive role in that. So the value of it can't be understated. I think it was great to hear the interventions from our two projects today, you know, really firsthand, and I think, as you said, Sarah, warts and all interventions, really to get an understanding of I suppose not only the pitfalls to watch out for, but also the real added value of it, and the sometimes the positive unintended outcomes that come from engaging and working with other partners across Europe. We also got an insight into the types of projects, or the types of partners that can be involved. So there's a wide range from academic to local authorities to smaller organizations. And one of the conversations that we've always had at the monitoring committee, and Alexandra and Sarah, you'll be aware of this, we're always talking about how do we encourage newcomers. So I think it's important that any organization that's interested, that has a really good project idea, should come to the program. It is open, it is welcome. Yes, it may not be easy to be the lead partner the first time off, but that's not necessarily important either. But it's really that the program is open and will welcome all key partners and stakeholders that have a really good project idea. I suppose, look, just to wrap up, I suppose just again to reiterate that North West Europe is a program where Ireland has done quite well in the past. So again, I would encourage you to continue to participate. It has contributed quite well to supporting the sustainable growth in our regions, for well-being, for quality of life, for strengthening the integration of regional economies across Ireland and across Europe. So, you know, it really plays a positive part. Ultimately, you listening here today are really the success of the program. So you need to come forward with your really good project ideas, your really good project proposals, for funding, which ultimately will make a real impact for people on the ground in Europe. So look, we would encourage you to examine all of the key documents that are on the Northwest Europe website, download the presentations from today, review the recording of today's presentation, and of course, contact Sarah. Sarah is there, available and willing to help you all, to support you in any way possible, to develop your project ideas. Finally, then, look, I'd just like to thank all the speakers. Thanks, Alexandra. Thank Michael. Thank John for their interaction today, and of course, thank all of the people in the background, Catherine, Rose, and Sarah, for putting all of this together. So, look, with that, I'll just say goodbye, and I think, Sarah, you're going to have some one-to-one sessions now for the rest of the afternoon. So
we are. David, I might ask you to hold on, please. We might take just ask the speakers to turn back on your cameras. We'll take a quick photo. Catherine is going to do a screenshot.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone, and thank you to all the listeners. We'll look forward to the one-to-one sessions and hope that you'll apply for funding. So thank you.
Okay. Take care.